Welcome into the Diamond Vols podcast. I'm Ben McKee, joined as always by Eric Cain. Here to preview the SEC tournament, one of my favorite weeks. It has finally arrived, Eric Cain.
Yeah, it's here, and you're officially kicking off a new season. You're turning the page, and it's very exciting. It's also, if you're a Tennessee fan, I'm sure the anxiety is through the roof right now because it's kind of not this weekend necessarily, but it's put up or shut up time, and it's what you play for all year. But looking forward to hopefully getting some good baseball in Hoover this weekend. I know rain is definitely a factor, but looking forward to what this weekend, or what this week rather, has in store. Hopefully for Tennessee.
I am in full conference tournament mode. Just wrote a story on Josh Elander that is up front on Volquest.com. Encourage you to go check that out. Coach Elander was nice enough to let me sit down with him in Starkville this past weekend and pick his brain about how he helped Tennessee get to the point that it is now. The early days of recruiting, telling me flat out that when he first got to Tennessee, they would ask a high school coach to have a player call them, and they just would never get a phone call. They couldn't even get particular guys on the phone. There's some great quotes in there from Tony Vitello as well on Josh Elander. So really wanted to sit down and write a story about the guy that is most important to this program that nobody knows anything about. Everybody knows the Frank Anderson story. Everybody's very familiar with Tony Vitello. Obviously, I feel like we've done a good job of telling the players' stories as well throughout the season. But Josh Elander, this top tier assistant coach in college baseball, who is going to be a head coach at some point, who had to fill in as a head coach at some point this season. Nobody knows anything about him and what he does. So I wrote a story on that. It's on the front of Volquest.com. But Eric, I say that I am in full conference tournament mode because while I was writing that, I was watching my Army Black Knights beat Bucknell in a critical game one of the Patriot League Conference Championship Series. They're doing a 2 out of 3, and it's between Army and Bucknell, and the winner of the 2 out of 3 goes to the NCAA tournament. And Army just walked off Bucknell after being down 7-5 entering the bottom of the ninth. They walked them off. So I'm thrilled. We're pressing record as Alabama beats Georgia 5-3. Georgia headed home from Hoover just a game in. This game started at 9:30 a.m. local time and is finishing at 3:30 because of the weather that Eric mentioned. And we'll talk about potential bad weather for the weekend in Hoover. But, man, two pretty big storylines just from game one real quick before we get into Tennessee. Alabama desperately needs to win 2 or 3 games to make it to the NCAA tournament. They knock off Georgia. And on the flip side, Georgia has just spiraled out of control. They lost their last 4 series to end the regular season and lose their first game in Hoover. Not great going into the postseason for the Georgia Bulldogs.
Nope, not great at all. And it's something that we've mentioned on the previous podcast, but how Georgia's kind of sputtering right now. And gosh, I mean, it's just looking. I've got the bracket pulled up in front of me at the time of this recording. As we mentioned, Alabama and Georgia just wrapped up. You've got South Carolina and Florida getting going here in a little bit. 7:00, the game that Tennessee fans will be watching, Ole Miss and Vanderbilt. And then tonight at 10:30, little Kentucky Auburn action. That game will not get over with until around after midnight Eastern time. And so already in conference tournament mode. Hopefully the rain won't be a factor for the days that Tennessee plays, but I'm sure it's going to be unavoidable. But yeah, on Georgia, man, I mean, losing the last 4 series of the season, now knocked out of the tournament, single elimination here on day one. What a horrible, horrible end to the season for the Bulldogs, no doubt about it.
Let's touch on the weather before we dive into some SEC awards. Those came out on Monday since we did our last podcast on Sunday evening, recapping Tennessee's series sweep of Mississippi State. If you didn't check that out, if you did not listen, if you missed it for whatever reason, we do forgive you, but we can point you into the right direction of where you can find it, and that is either on the Volquest Apple Podcast feed, Volquest Spotify feed, the Volquest SoundCloud feed, or you can even go check out the Swain Event feed on Apple Podcasts and SoundCloud. So plenty of ways you can find it. You can also go to Eric and I's Twitter account and scroll, because I tweeted it and I saw where Eric retweeted it. So it is easy to find there as well. But since we have last spoke, there were SEC awards announced. We'll touch on that, and then we'll preview some things that Tony Vitello talked about in his media availability early this morning. He pretty much gave his pitching plans for the weekend. He gave an update on Jared Dickey. We'll discuss whether it's better for Tennessee to play Vanderbilt or Ole Miss. But I want to start with the weather, because I mentioned that Alabama just beat Georgia finally in that game at 3:30 Central Time. That game started at 9:30 Central Time. There were 2 rain delays. And now they're saying that there's about to be more rain coming into the area. Florida, South Carolina is supposed to be the next game. And typically that's 30 to 45 minutes after the previous game. But because of the weather coming into the area, looks like that one's not going to start on time. So we could get a pretty bad log jam here coming up. And right now, Tennessee is supposed to play Vanderbilt or Ole Miss at 4:30 Central Time, so 5:30 Eastern Time on Wednesday. But I just don't see how all 4 of these games on Tuesday are going to fit in. You've still got 3 to play, and it's already 3:30 local time. They won't end a game at a particular time, but I did get a text earlier today that said that there's not a rule of when you can't start a game. There's no rule, but they would likely not start a game after 10 or 10:30, which means another game from the single elimination will have to be played on Wednesday when double elimination starts. And then Thursday and Friday, it's just going to be a huge logjam. And here's the real scary part, Eric, is I don't see how they're going to get in all 4 of the games on Tuesday. The forecast looks worse on Wednesday and Thursday. So they're going to get all the games in. They're going to play 9 innings. I know a lot of people have been asking questions, and I think it's because people think that there's so many games each day. Well, Friday, there's only 2 games. Saturday, there's only 2 games. So instead of 2 games each day, I think you'll just see a lot of baseball played on Friday and Saturday to make up for it.
Yeah, you kind of beat me to the punch there. Meaning, as you go on, less teams are in the tournament, obviously, and so there are more slots available to play. The way I see it, tonight, I'll be surprised. And again, we'll publish this podcast before this late game is supposed to begin. I'll be surprised if that game against Kentucky and Auburn even plays tonight, right? And it's not like you're going to slide that in there before the first game on a Wednesday, because the first game on a Wednesday is at 9:30 Central or local time. You're not going to start that game at 6:30 or 7 o'clock in the morning, right? So, if rain doesn't impact anything else, you'd like to play 5 games on Wednesday. That's just not going to happen. So, it's going to be wild to try to figure out exactly how you're going to get all these games in. But again, to what you said, as the week goes on, more teams will be going home. There will be more spots available to play. But just kind of have that bracket printed out, or at least, have that pencil ready to mark out and put new start times, because it always runs behind. That's tournament baseball. That's any tournament, right? Basketball, baseball, whatever. But you're gonna be having moving some games from one day to the next, it sounds like, because the rain is definitely going to be a factor. I'll be shocked if Kentucky and Auburn play later tonight. I don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah, I would be too. They don't even know when they're going to start this second game. And even if they can get the second game started, are they going to have to start and stop like Alabama and Georgia had to? So I bet what we will end up seeing is Friday or Saturday, those final Fridays, I guess, kind of the last elimination day, and then Saturday is supposed to be your final 4 or whatever, the semifinals, I believe. What you'll see is probably a team have to win a game in the morning and then play again later that afternoon or later that night. I bet there will be at least one team, if not more, that have to play 2 games in one day at some point, because it does look like the forecast opens up going into the weekend. The problem is just trying to find a way to to get to the weekend, because like I said, Wednesday or today, Tuesday, has created quite the issue, but Wednesday and Thursday, the weather is supposed to be even worse. I think today when I checked, and granted, I'm going off the Apple iPhone forecast, which is not always spot on, as everybody knows. But I think it was 60% chance of weather today, and then Wednesday is 80% chance, and then like 90% chance on Thursday. So forecast does not look good whatsoever. And here's a pro tip, by the way, to keep up with all the stops and the starts, and that way you're not having to refresh Twitter or whatever to keep up with the game times and when the games are going to start back. Go to the SEC account on Twitter if you're interested in keeping up with the SEC tournament as a whole.
Turn them notifications on.
Exactly. Go to the SEC Twitter and turn on the tweet notifications. I have the SEC tweet notifications turned on, and this morning I knew exactly when Alabama and Georgia was starting and stopping because I was getting Twitter notifications straight to my phone. So if you want to keep up with the SEC tournament as a whole, do that. If you only want to keep up with Tennessee, if Tennessee gets in a weather delay or the game's not started on time and you only care about when Tennessee is playing, go do the same thing, but for Tennessee's baseball account, or heck, even go turn on my Twitter notifications because I will tweet out updates as well as I usually do. Looking at these SEC awards, we'll start with the elephant in the room, Cain. We'll start with SEC Player of the Year, and then we'll go through the rest of the list after we have the conversation about Trey Lipscomb. Nobody can see this because this isn't going to be on YouTube. Maybe we'll find a way to do some YouTube podcasts for the NCAA tournament. But you have the setup behind you because of your Locked On Vols podcast, and on your little whiteboard you have written Trey Lipscomb snubbed ? So I'll ask you your own question. Was Trey Lipscomb snubbed of being SEC Player of the Year? Because the award did go to two players. Sonny DeShera from Auburn. He was co-SEC Player of the Year, along with Dylan Cruz from LSU.
I mean, I know the popular answer is going to be yes, he was absolutely snubbed. I mean, here's the thing, though. When I look at it, this was the one that could have the greatest controversy. This is the one that could spark the greatest discussion, right? And we can dive into the nitty-gritty of conference play versus out of conference play, on-base slugging, OPS, all that time, OPS plus, the home runs, RBI, runs scored. I mean, we can dive into that until we're blue in the face, and I understand that. Point remains, Dylan Cruz had a great season. Sonny DeShera had a great season. Trey Lipscomb had an awesome, great season. All three of those guys were deserving, in my opinion. So absolutely, we can have that talk. I just look at it from this aspect. Like Tony Vitello, there was no doubt about it. He was going to be Coach of the Year. Drew Beam, the only doubt was if Chase Burns was going to take it away from him, right? He was going to be Freshman of the Year. Pitcher of the Year, Chase Dolander, he was going to be Pitcher of the Year. This one was the one that said, okay, we can go to this guy, or this guy. I think where the frustration lies is they gave it to two players and they split it and had co-players of the year, and Trey Lipscomb wasn't one of those. So if I had a vote, I would have voted him Player of the Year. Full disclosure, I didn't. I don't vote on this. I'm not shocked the way this turned out, but this is a guy that's on the the semifinalists end of the season, watch list for the Golden Spikes Award. He's one of the best players in the country. So I do think that was the biggest question mark about this whole thing, when Tennessee overall had a great showing. And I know we'll talk about it. There's some players that were left out and everything, but overall Tennessee was all over this list because, again, it is the best team in the country.
Glad to know that you did not vote on an award that is voted by the coaches. I'm glad that you didn't sneak in a vote there.
Well, for the media, whenever they vote for all this, I know USA Today's already voted on theirs. That's what I mean by that, more so than anything. But the one we're referencing, yes, it is the coaches.
Yes, and that's the one that I pay attention to because these writers don't pay attention to the sport near as much as people think that they do. But congrats to Trey. He was named the USA Today SEC Player of the Year.
Yeah,
that's a cool honor. But I mean, I didn't even open up the article that lists out the players who made the all SEC team.
It's like football with preseason, where you have every single publication in the world that votes on preseason. And then not only that, they have preseason all SEC third teams. Now I was a first time voter for all that stuff last year for the SEC media. And it was so difficult to vote on an SEC preseason third team. I'm telling you, it's just stupid at that point, right?
Yes. And my rant has always been, and I've had this rant for years when we were still rocking on the Swain event. Anybody who has followed my work for a long time has heard me discuss in the past multiple times how these writers do not pay attention to the sport the way that people think they do. They cover the game that they're supposed to cover, whatever team that is that they cover, that they essentially whatever the company they work for requires them to cover. They watch that, they go home and they go watch The Bachelor or The Bachelorette. They're not going home like these niche podcasts that are out there. And like I flat out say, like yours and mine, that they're not going home and watching football, watching basketball, watching baseball. They're not. They're having food arguments on Twitter and watching the Bachelorette and The Bachelor and Real Housewives of Atlanta and things like that.
Because what are the shows been? What other show we've established The Bachelor and The Bachelorette, okay?
Yeah, we can go Real Housewives of Atlanta. We can go whatever you want. Game of Thrones, and look, some of those thrones are good, but people care more about the storyline of those shows than the sport that they cover. Is my point. And then they're expected to, at the end of the season, vote on awards that they haven't been paying attention to.
Mm-hmm.
They haven't been paying attention to. They know the big names on the big teams. That's it. So that's my rant. That's always been my rant when it comes to awards, and that's why I put more emphasis. Although I realize that even the coaches' vote is flawed. I recognize that because I imagine most of the SIDs voted for the coaches, but at least the coaches and SIDs have an awareness of who the best players in the league are, and not just the best of the best players.
And I'll say this too. I mean, like voting for, if you're a beat writer, if you're on the beat like we are for Tennessee, and you do every sport, and I do football and help out with little other stuff, like you're so invested in that team in terms of going to every single media availability, going to the practices that are open, writing recruiting articles, whatever, all the stuff that we do. Okay, it's all on Tennessee centric. But for football, when I voted this year, it's like, okay, well, I watched every single game Tennessee played. I watched SEC football. I felt comfortable voting on stuff in the SEC because, again, that's what my life is engulfed in. Now, I've long said it would be so cool for me or for you or whatever to be a Heisman voter. I think that'd be awesome, right? I mean, that's awesome. But I spend, you and I on Saturdays, man, you spend like, depending on what time of the game, you spend all day at Neyland Stadium. You spend, if it's a night game, you're not getting home till a couple, like 2 a.m. You are missing so much football outside. I know this is football centric, what I'm saying right now, outside of your team, that I wouldn't feel comfortable having a Heisman vote. I truly wouldn't. And so to your point, there are so many voters, and it frustrates me to no end, that just only watch their team, or only are lazy, and they don't go home and watch, Pac-12 After Dark, or the early games of the noon kickoffs. And for those that would, but just can't, like us, shoot, we're covering this team. So that to me is very frustrating. There are so many Heisman voters and voters for the AP top 25 that just should have that card revoked for sure. And it won't, it is what it is. But to your point, that's something that frustrates me as well, because again, I think about it from my shoes, and it's like, if they wanted me to vote for a top 25 or a Heisman, it'd be difficult for me because I watch Tennessee so much that I miss a lot of games that I want to be watching, and I catch as much as I can, but it just kind of is what it is.
Right. And look, I'll even do a little humble brag on myself. Like football weekends, game day is obviously very busy, as you just illustrated. It also carries into Sunday, covering the recruits that were in town, and goes into Monday as you start to preview the rest of the week. While I'm working on my other stuff, you know what I have playing on my iPad next to me?
Game from the other day.
The other games that I missed because I was covering Tennessee's games. So even if I don't get to watch it real time, I go back and watch the games. Because I want to know about the teams that Tennessee is going to be playing. I don't feel like you can properly break down Tennessee's games if you haven't watched their upcoming opponents. So that we can have a whole podcast on that.
I got a nice little rhythm of Sunday mornings. Now, airport visits are another thing with recruits, but Sunday mornings detailing, and you and me both do this, and I don't know about you, it takes me hours because I'm like the old ball coach sitting in the film room, stop, rewind, make notes, and go. So I rewatch Tennessee's deal and do a write-up on that. And then in the afternoon work, I turn on the SEC network or do kind of what you're doing, try to catch a game or two from the day before. But I mean, it's tough. I mean, still with all that, because you have so much going on that football game day weekend.
Yes, I'm right there with you. We do have a little bit of news here in the middle of our podcast of what we were already discussing. The SEC has announced that due to inclement weather, Game 2 will start at a time to be determined, and that they expect a significant delay. And that was the South Carolina-Florida game that we were discussing. The SEC also announced that Game 4 will not be played tonight. So Kentucky and Auburn will not be played tonight. That will be moved to tomorrow, Wednesday, May 25th, and that time is to be determined. And that does impact Tennessee, because what I would imagine what they do is that game will be played first thing in the morning, and then they would start the Wednesday game. So Arkansas, Alabama was supposed to be the very first game. Well, now they're going to be the second game after Auburn and Kentucky plays. Tennessee was supposed to be the third game on Wednesday. Now it'll be the night game. But here's the difficult part is if Tennessee is the last game and the weather does not look good at all, I guarantee you Tennessee doesn't play on Wednesday.
Yeah, I was going to say, if all goes well, fingers crossed, Tennessee's got the late game tomorrow night. And again, that's if everything lines up.
Yes.
So
and the forecast looks worse, like I said.
Yeah, we very well could be waiting on Tennessee to play until Thursday.
Yes. And I don't think the radar looks good on Thursday either. So I don't know. Maybe they're gonna have to change it to single elimination. Maybe that's something that they would do. I don't know. You always have weather delays at the SEC tournament, but never. I don't remember weather delays for 3 straight days where the weather just did not cooperate. And again, I'm looking right now at the weather on my phone, so take it with a grain of salt. But it says today in Hoover, 100% chance of thunderstorms. Wednesday, 90%. Thursday, 90%. Friday, Saturday, Sunday, all sunshine. But it just seems like it's going to be hard to get in any baseball these next 3 days. So maybe they would just go to single elimination for the sake of getting the tournament in. Maybe they would just try to cram it into Friday and Saturday, like you and I talked about earlier, because you have 2 games a day. But honestly, Cain, I would be surprised if Tennessee plays on Wednesday at this rate.
Yeah, I would too. And being part of tournament like setups like this in the past and broadcasting and doing some game ops and everything, like this tournament will not go into Monday. It won't.
No, it can't because the NCAA tournament.
Exactly. So no matter what. And plus, I was just thinking, like, there's not a minor league team. The Barons don't play there anymore. They stopped playing there a while ago. Like, there's no team coming to play at the Hoover Met like you would at the Tennessee Smokies that you got to get out of the way for. But yeah, the NCAA tournament, like this tournament will not last into Monday. So whatever the case may be, if you got to cut some games, whatever, if it comes to that last resort, I mean, Sunday's going to be your last day. So it's just going to be weird. But nonetheless, Tennessee will play a couple times this week, hopefully, on into Sunday and get it done. And whatever you do, again, this is just another variable for Tony Vitello and Frank Anderson that's saying, okay, with the rain, trying to get everybody adequate rest moving forward to line up, say you play on that Thursday next week or that Friday, trying to line your guys up. I'm glad I'm not making those decisions. I guess that's why Tony Vitello is making the big bucks, right?
I mean, this really does throw a wrench into the pitching, because you want to make sure everybody gets work before the regionals, and maybe you combine starters if for some reason the SEC cuts out some games. I mean, I think they would have to go to single elimination if they were to get in this tournament. But who knows? Maybe they can squeeze it all in Friday and Saturday. But at this rate, I don't know. I haven't seen anything like this. But to put a bow on the Trey Lipscomb situation, we went on a long tangent.
We did.
Eric would have voted for Trey Lipscomb, but fair to say that you don't think he was necessarily snubbed?
Yeah.
That's how I feel. I would have voted for him. I don't think he was snubbed, though.
I'm not going to sit here and beat my chest and say this is the worst thing in the world, because yes. I mean, Teixeira and Cruz, they had great years. They're deserving. So is Trey Lipscomb. It's just kind of unfortunate the way it kind of panned out. So yeah, I would agree with that. I wouldn't say that he's necessarily snubbed, but he was definitely deserving to win the award, but I wouldn't say that he's snubbed.
Yes, that is my feeling exactly. I don't think he was robbed or snubbed, but I do think he should have won, and he would have had my vote. He was the most productive hitter on one of what people are saying the greatest baseball teams of all time. And I do agree that conference numbers should be emphasized more than the season numbers as a whole. I do agree with that thought process. And look, Dylan Cruz, Sonny DeShera, they had slightly better numbers in conference than Trey did. But I also think you're discrediting. I think Trey Lipscomb provides more value to Tennessee than Sonny DeShera does for Auburn, because you have to take into consideration the defensive side of things as well. And not that Trey has been flawless on the defensive side of the ball, but Trey plays a more valuable position in baseball than Sonny does. Sure, Sonny touches the ball more because he's the first baseman. He catches the ball, and I'm sure, well, I don't know. He is Sonny DeShera. He's not in great shape. Maybe he doesn't scoop a lot of balls. He did not put on a great fielding display when I watched him in Knoxville in person in depth. But this past weekend at Mississippi State, Trey was flawless at third base. He was amazing at third base this past weekend. And there was one inning. I can't remember who was on the mound, but it was the Saturday, the series finale. Kirby comes in and gets back-to-back 2 ground balls. And the first one is a slow roller for Trey down the baseline, and the base runner is going home, and he's essentially in Trey's way of throwing it home, and he still makes a great play on it. And then he had to go back on a ball that he hit hard, and then the next inning made 2 more great plays. I think you've just got to take that into consideration as well. I think Trey's value to his team is more important than Sonny's, even though Sonny is pretty much the only great hitter in Auburn's lineup. And look, Trey does get a little bit of cushion. He gets he's got Evan Russell behind him. That's a safety net right there to where teams somewhat have to pitch to Trey. But I just think Trey had the most valuable season of those 3, and he would have gotten my vote.
Yeah. And I was going to say too, kind of, you touched on 2 things I want to mention real quick. Like, when you stack up the defense and meaning more to their team defensively as well, Trey man's the hot corner, DeShera at first base. I'm with you on that argument. Cruz man's the outfield. He plays a great outfield as well. So that's a different conversation. But also, you mentioned like DeShera being like one of the only hitters for Auburn. And this is where I would say on the other end of the spectrum, you can make the argument that those 2 other guys meant more to their lineups than Lipscomb did to Tennessee, because Lipscomb was fantastic, but think of all these power bats you got in here on this lineup, right? Consider one of the greatest, as you mentioned, teams of all time, regular season of all time. And you got guys with 10 home runs that are not everyday players. Blake Berg bursting on the scene, Christian Moore. So again, any way you want to spend, that's why I think it was such a difficult decision. I think you had 3 guys who were very deserving, and we can sit here and debate all day long, but bringing it all together here, like you said, to me, snubbed, no. Deserving, yes. Would have gotten my vote, yes.
Those who were not snubbed were Chase Dolander, the SEC Pitcher of the Year, very deserving. He is the second Vol to ever win SEC Pitcher of the Year. Former Tennessee right-hander Luke Hochevar was the other to do so in 2005.
He was pretty good.
And yeah, just a little bit. But with Dolander, Cain, and I tweeted this out, the college baseball transfer season began Thursday, because for those teams who did not make a conference tournament, their season is over, and players have begun entering the portal, as we have seen with the Kansas shortstop. Wink, wink. How about the ammunition for Tony Vitello and Frank Anderson and Josh Elander that Chase Dolander transfers from Tennessee, or from Georgia Southern to Tennessee, wins the SEC Pitcher of the Year in his first year at Tennessee, and it's the day after college baseball portal season begins, as if they needed more ammunition on the recruiting trail. Because look, it was worded to me when I asked about potential transfers that they would like to keep an eye out on, not in terms of name, but position. It was said to me that there's always going to be one Chase Dolander. And I think Tennessee's goal every year is to get that Chase Dolander, that elite arm, to come into your program. And how about the ammunition for Tennessee to use that Dolander as look at this evidence. This guy transfers to Tennessee and carves up the SEC under Frank Anderson, wins pitcher of the year. Now he's being talked about as the top college arm in the 2023 MLB draft, and he's probably going to be a top 5 pick. Ooh, that's some heavy ammunition. Poor college baseball.
I was going to say, I mean, that what more do you want, right? It says if you come in here, why not come to Tennessee? You come in here, work, earn a spot, take advantage of the opportunity, and you could be the next Chase Dolander. So, yeah, you're poor college baseball, right? Because that is something you can another thing you can throw into the face of a potential prospect in the transfer portal.
Yeah, and not only that, but how about 2 freshmen in the running for SEC Freshman of the Year? Drew Beam wins the award, SEC Freshman of the Year, second Vol to ever do so. Former Tennessee catcher J.P. Arancibia won it in 2005. Pretty funny that Hochaver won his in 05, the pitcher of the year, that is. Arancibia won the freshman of the year in 2005. They both did it in the same year. And then the next time Tennessee won either of those awards was also in the same year with Chase Dolander and Drew Beam. Look, Cain, I would have liked to see Burns and Beam been the co-freshman of the year.
No, I think that'd be neat. I think that would, I mean, they're both deserving, of course. And again, too, value, right? Burns was your Friday night starter, right? And we talked about how Dolander is clearly the best pitcher on this team and everything. But, early in the season, when he was kind of, figuring things out, not getting out of the 5th inning, 6th inning because he was throwing so many pitches and all that. And Tennessee was just so consistent with a true freshman and Chase Burns going out there every Friday night, going to Houston, leading the team out in Houston, going toe-to-toe with the then number 1 team in the country and pitching so well. I think that means a lot, right? Because you're getting everybody's, first chance, right? And so that would be really neat to see those guys being co-freshmen of the year. But I mean, it's hard to argue that run that Drew Beam went on there in the middle of SEC play. He was just so phenomenal and so good on the road and big series for Tennessee. Any way you want to spin it, it's a positive for Tennessee, but it would have been neat to see both those guys. I mean, if you're giving out co-player of the year, why not give out co-freshman of the year, right?
Right. And by the way, that's one thing I did not mention when it comes to Trey Lipscomb. You have co-SEC players of the year, and Trey Lipscomb's not one of them. That to me just baffles me.
That's the frustrating part, and I get it. I think that's where Tennessee fans are sitting here saying, well, what the heck? That's where they say he got snubbed because they picked 2 and he's not one of them. So I get that. I 100% get that.
The other awards that Tennessee took home, they had several players make the All-SEC team. 6 different Vols made the 2022 All-SEC baseball teams. Trey Lipscomb, Drew Gilbert, Chase Dolander were all first-team SEC baseball players. Chase Burns, Drew Beam, they made the second team. The freshman team, Chase Burns, Drew Beam, and Blake Burke. And then the defensive team, Drew Gilbert, made it. And Eric, we talked about this on your Locked On Vols podcast. Go check that out as well. Eric will tweet it out first thing Wednesday morning. But and I haven't dug into the stats as well as I would have liked. I've just been too busy to be able to do so. But off the cuff, how is Jordan Beck not an All-SEC outfielder? How is Christian Moore not on the All-SEC freshman team? And Evan Russell, Luke Lipsius, can we have a conversation about them as well? So Tennessee racks up, but my initial thought was like, this Tennessee team dominated everybody but Kentucky, and it's really only, 5 players that got recognized? Trey, or I guess 6 different ones, as I said a moment ago, but it feels like it should have been more, as crazy as that may sound.
Yeah, because you got a couple of these guys who are obviously, you're the pitcher of the year, you're a first teamer, you're freshman of the year, you're a second teamer. Of course, you're a freshman recipient as well. So like a couple of these guys got multiple awards, but I honestly feel like whether it's a coach, whether it's an SID, whoever's filling out this ballot, you're sitting here saying, okay, well, this can't be an entirely Tennessee team. Right, wrong, indifferent. And I truly believe that's the mindset going in, right? And even though, but I mean, if it's deserving, it's deserving. I get it. But I think the human element part of this is saying, okay, well, I can't keep just marking down Tennessee. I got to draw the line somewhere. Jordan Beck should be on there 100%. We can talk Lipsius. We can talk Russell. Jordan Beck should be on there. First round talent. And that's when you get in the nitpicky, well, he was better out of conference than in conference, or whenever you stack up his in conference play. I don't care. He's phenomenal. He should have been on the second team for sure, to your point. And again, talk about these freshmen. I mean, Christian Moore, how is he not a part of that all freshman team? I have no clue, but I truly believe the human element's a part of that as well.
The thing I like most about some of these players being snubbed, Eric, is that as if they needed a bigger chip on their shoulder, they will most certainly have added weight to that chip. I think Jordan Beck will have something to prove. And look, I continue to think that he's not in as big of a slump as maybe his numbers may indicate, or as much of a conversation as some people want to make it. Saturday, he he stroked the ball all over the field and just had nothing to show for it. He had 2 balls at Kentucky that he felt like were going to be home runs, and just didn't leave the park because of the weather there that weekend. And he's seen a lot of pitches. He's battling in at bats, and he's drawing walks, and he's coming through in the clutch. Tennessee doesn't win that game 2 in Mississippi State if he doesn't hit that RBI single after the Luke Lipschius double. So I think he's still playing pretty good baseball at the plate. He's definitely playing great in the field. Mississippi State kept running on him for some reason, but I don't think he's in a slump like his stats may indicate. And I think he's going to certainly try to prove that this weekend, along with the unfortunateness, whatever, of being left off of the All SEC teams, and then Christian Moore as well. That one, again, I haven't really dove into the numbers there of maybe who he should have replaced. The Texas A&M second baseman was on there. I'm not too familiar with his work, to be quite honest. But Simo did not have a great SEC season from start to finish, so I would imagine that hurt him. But the team as a whole, Trey Lipscomb being left off the SEC Player of the Year or not winning the award, I think they're just going to have a bigger chip moving forward on their shoulder, and it's not like this team needed that.
I was going to say, I mean, give this team any more motivation to feel like they've been slighted, to feel like they've been disrespected. It seems like this team doesn't need to have that. I've heard this conversation throughout the season. A lot of people that aren't really dialed into it saying, "Oh, well, Tennessee they only play well, or whenever they feel like they've got something to prove, or they're playing against the umpires or the media or whatever." It's like, no, they don't. I mean, hell, they won 40 plus, almost 50 games, right? You don't just win that because of a chip. You win that because of pure talent. But when they do have a chip on their shoulder, it gets a little bit more oomph, maybe. So nonetheless, they're going to be just fine. I mean, at the end of the day, I think Jordan Beck knows his value. I mean, I think that especially an older guy too, he knows what his future is in this game. It is what it is, but maybe that'll give him a little something to ponder on in the batter's box this weekend. And I mean, I'm with you, man. He's been putting barrel on ball. It's just hard. It's just been tough luck for him. And he's one of the better outfielders in college baseball, in my opinion, but one of the better corner outfielders. So little bit more to use as motivation, I would assume, for these guys. But I mean, at the end of the day, you can't have them all on there, right? And it's unfortunate because there's so many other ones that are deserving to be on this team as well.
Even the coaching staff doesn't think that he's in a slump and feel good where he is at the plate right now. And you mentioned he knows his own value, and yeah, his value is that he's going to be a first round pick come July. So
yeah,
Jordan Beck is perfectly fine. So
I'll take this one. It's fine. I'm about to get paid. All right, so I'm going to be good.
Yes, absolutely. We spent a lot of time talking about the SEC awards and the weather in Hoover, and at this point, the weather just looks despicable. I'd be stunned if Tennessee plays on Wednesday. I really would, just because they'll be the last game of the day. The weather doesn't look good, and the weather looks just as bad on Thursday. So I don't know when Tennessee is going to play, but we are going to try to give a little bit of a preview to the start of Tennessee's week in Hoover.
Let me ask you this, Ben. And again, these are questions that you don't know the answer to, and so that's why I'm going to ask you.
Yes, I
do. I mean, everyone's going to get work in no matter what, because it's important. You didn't have a midweek game this week. You've got to get work in, the traditional midweek game and traditional weekend series. You've got to get your work in, keep it status quo. I mean, good. Say Tennessee doesn't play tomorrow. Say Tennessee doesn't play Thursday. I mean, what's that look like in terms of they're not going to play into Monday? We know that. I mean, is it just going to be, okay, well, we're going to have to combine starts, piggybacks, go to the bullpen a little bit earlier, because again, you want to win these games, but the number one priority is crossing those T's, dotting those I's, and getting ready for next weekend. I think from a pitching standpoint, it's going to be just ridiculous the way we see Tennessee pitchers used this weekend. If it is shortened and condensed, and especially if you miss out on, and maybe we're getting ahead of ourselves, maybe, and that's fair. But especially if you don't play Wednesday or Thursday, I think it could look so bizarre this weekend in terms of the pitching.
I think in a way it'll kind of help Tennessee because it'll be condensed into a weekend setting, and that's what regional weekend is. It is a weekend setting, not a week-long setting like the SEC tournament is without weather. So I think in a way it can kind of help. And if Tennessee doesn't end up playing until Thursday, and that's the game in which Blade is going to pitch, and maybe since it is on Thursday, maybe Tennessee decides to go to Dolander and saves Blade for Sunday. If they were to make it to Sunday, it keeps them on rotation. It keeps them on track. Dolander will be ready to go next weekend in the regionals, and Blade wouldn't be going from Wednesday to Sunday to regional weekend. And it's a weird balance because you want to make sure all of those starters get work this weekend, but you also don't know how long you're going to make it this weekend in Hoover. So maybe the freshmen get some weeks off if Tennessee doesn't go far in Hoover, and Tidwell and Dolander are able to go. It's so hard to tell. So many extenuating circumstances that we just do not know the answer to yet. But in a way, I think it can help. And look, the main objective is just to make sure that these arms are getting work this week. Like Blake Tidwell needs to throw this week. Ben Joyce needs to throw this week. Chase Dolander stay in rhythm. I think it would be beneficiary if Beam or Burns don't throw. That gives them another weekend off after hitting that freshman wall this past month. I think that would be beneficial for Tennessee, but we just don't really know the answers. And speaking of the pitching staff, and I guess it's kind of a mute point at this point, but Tony Vitello met with the media on Tuesday morning, did say Blake Tidwell was going to start game one in Hoover on Wednesday. And he did say and throw in there that I reserve the right to change that depending on who we play. Or I think it's just coach speak. I would be surprised if Tidwell does not start if they do end up playing on Wednesday. But he said Blake Tidwell on Wednesday, Chase Dolander on Thursday, Chase Burns on Friday, Drew Beam on Saturday. I think pretty spot on and to the point there from Mr. Vitello.
And that's what we thought was going to happen when we saw that, Tidwell came in and threw the back half of game 2 of that series against Mississippi State. It lined him up to be the first guy out there if you were to play on a Wednesday. Keeps Dolander on his normal rotation the last 3 weeks of pitching on a Thursday. And, from there, and so on and so forth. So I think it's pretty, I think that's a pretty solid plan. I think that any way you want to look at it, there's not a game where any opposing lineup has any leeway. So, we'll see what happens, and especially how the weather impacts that. But that's a good starting 4, and then ultimately, whenever it crunches down to a 3-game set in regional play, or super regional play, we'll have to see which one would be the odd man left out.
And look, at this point, it may not even matter what Tony said on Tuesday in regards to the pitching plans, but if that ends up playing out and a miracle happens and Tennessee actually plays each day, I'm very curious as to what that would mean for Sunday. My opinion is that Tidwell would start on short rest on Sunday in the championship game if they were to make it. And then if not Blade, then I think Camden Sewell or Ben Joyce, depending on what their workload had looked like up until that point.
Yeah, I was just going to say, who knows how much they've been used already this series. And you can't necessarily – they've got to get their work in, so it's not like you're going to be holding them or anything. Maybe by the time you get to, in a traditional sense, if you play Wednesday, Thursday, maybe you got that Friday off, and then Saturday you don't go balls to the wall with those guys and holding them for this. But if you do bring Blake Tidwell back around to start that other game, that could put him in line to start game 3 of regional, right? I mean, again, he would be on normal rest at that point as well. So, again, I think it still works out regardless how you look at it. But again, Tennessee has options, and that's what we talked about. Didn't Canada Sewell start one of those games in Hoover last year?
Started against Florida and shoved it up their rear end.
There you go. Yeah. So again, it's happened.
I think
before.
It was game 3.
And we certainly saw Ben Joyce get the start a couple weeks, or I guess it was last weekend, 2 weekends ago, whatever. So anyway you spend it, you have options, and that's why Tennessee's so good. And I do believe even if you bring Blade around, he'll have to get the ball game 3, but he'll still be ready on normal rest for a regional weekend.
It was game 4, not game 3, that Camden started last year, because Chad Dallas started game 1 against Alabama. They lost. The next day, game 2 against Mississippi State. I can't remember who pitched that game. Maybe Will Heflin. But Tennessee wins that game. Game 3 was against Alabama again. Tennessee beat them in that game, and I think that was Blake Tidwell. And then they played Florida on the Saturday game. That's when Camden Sewell started to send Tennessee to the SEC championship game. The good news that came out of Tony Vitello's media availability was the update on Tennessee utility man Jared Dickey, who has been out the last several weeks due to the bone bruise that he suffered at Ole Miss earlier this year. Tony Vitello said that they've exhausted everything. He's paid attention to the details, and it's all paid off. Said that Jared Dickey is on the active roster for the SEC tournament this week, but that it's 50-50 if he'll play. Definitely expects him to play in the regionals next weekend. And look, that's exactly what I said on Saturday or Sunday when we recapped the Mississippi State sweep. Yes, all hail Ben, as you were motioning, Eric. But he took swings last week. He felt good. I expect him to pinch hit mostly this week. I would even be kind of surprised if he DH'd, just because he would still have to run, and I don't think they're completely ready to let him do that just yet. If he pinch hits and has to run, then okay, so be it. But DHing and you go for 4 and you're running on it all game long, or even pinch hitting, all you got to do is make it to first or second or back to home. If you hit a Kirk Gibson type of home run, so somebody can pinch run for you. So yeah. I think that we'll only see him in pinch hit situations. And then next week, I think it's more of a conversation of, okay, and we talked about this on the podcast the other night. Are we taking Seth Stevenson out of the lineup? Are we taking Blake Burke out of the lineup? 2 questions that I'm glad I do not have to answer.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say for what I want to see from Jared Dickey this week. I don't want to see him DHing. He's not going to play the field. We know that. He won't play the field the rest of the season, in my opinion. Well, I don't know. I guess we'll see. But I do want to see him get a couple of at-bats, if possible, late in games, win or loss, don't care. I want to see him get some pinch hit opportunities late in ball games, get the timing back down, just get used to seeing live pitching. I mean, sure, he's getting that. He's taking live pitching and in the cages and or in the at practice or whatnot. But in a game like situation, I think that can go a long way. Just so he has 1 or 2 under his belt before regional play, I think that'll go a long way. And then, yeah, you're exactly right. If they feel confident in him playing the field, which I sincerely doubt will happen, that's just me. Again, that's just me. You have a tough situation you have a tough question to answer. But then again, you and I have been so high on Blake Burke and that DH role. It's just another option to have. And I would honestly just play the hot hand at that point in time. And you couldn't go wrong either way, because you have the other guy that can come in and play the last couple at bats innings or pinch hit opportunities. It just makes your team that much deeper and stronger.
My off the cuff thought is that as much as I love Jared Dickey, it would be hard to throw him in the lineup and pull Seth Stevenson, who has seemed to find a rhythm, bring something to your lineup that really nobody else has in the lineup, and that's speed on the bases. Look, Blake Burke maybe needs to become not maybe, he does need to become more consistent. But look, he's a true freshman. He's not supposed to be consistent. Jordan Beck sure wasn't consistent. Drew Gilbert wasn't even consistent. Chase Burns, Drew Beam, they haven't been consistent per se.
And Burke, what is it, 71 at bats so far this season? I mean, that's it. Like he's barely been in there, right?
Right. And he was very good throughout the weekend against Georgia. But off the top of my head, I believe that's been the most consistent weekend that he has had all year long. Even this weekend, he hits the 3-run home run, and I think he goes 0 for the next 2 days. So, look, I still want Blake Burke in the lineup. Don't get me wrong, but I almost think off the cuff, off the top of my head, spitballing that would maybe be more the answer than pulling Seth Stevenson. But look, I also want Blake Burke in the lineup because I want him to run into a 3-run home run. Because if you start him 3 straight games, the likelihood of him running into a baseball because he's so talented is very likely. So even again, the same point with Blake Burke, although he's not as consistent, it still applies to my thought with Seth Stevenson is that Blake, even for a freshman, seems to have found a rhythm here. And like Seth, do you really want to pull either of those two guys who seem to be in a rhythm at this point at the most important time of the year for a guy, although I love Jared Dickey, that hasn't played in weeks and will have some rust to knock off? Do you really want to mess that up? Because if Jared isn't swinging the bat coming off of injury like he was before the injury, do you throw Seth Stevenson out of rhythm, Blake Burke out of rhythm with that move? That could be a dicey gamble there. So that will be very it'll be very interesting to see what Tony Vitello does, to say the least. But very talented guys. Before we get out of here, I do want to break down a potential matchup with Vanderbilt or Ole Miss. I'll ask you first. Who do you think is the better matchup for Tennessee? Yeah, at the end of the day, I think Tennessee should obviously beat both of them. I think Ole Miss and Vanderbilt have different strengths. Ole Miss's strength is hitting. Vanderbilt's strength is pitching. Which would you rather see Tennessee play if you could pick?
I think Tennessee. Again, I'm with you. I think Tennessee beats both teams, but I don't know if you said this. I saw it from somebody, and I couldn't agree more a couple days ago. Like, Ole Miss's lineup is dangerous.
Very.
Vanderbilt's is, I mean, it's not as, and so I would take Tennessee's chances in hitting against good pitching because I'm that much more confident. And not that I'm not confident in Tennessee's pitching. I'm just saying that Ole Miss lineup's good. And so I'd rather Tennessee square off against somebody great on the mound because Tennessee's got loads and loads up and down the lineup, top to bottom, good hitters. So I guess what I'm trying to say is Tennessee Vanderbilt, I think, would be a better matchup for Tennessee if Vanderbilt is to win this game that's going to happen maybe tomorrow. Well, it'll happen tomorrow because it'll be the game number 1. So, yeah.
Well, it's funny that you say that because I agree with what you're saying, but my mind thinks the complete opposite. I actually think I would rather take my chances against better hitting than pitching because I think pitching is more likely to show up just in general. The sport of baseball, I trust good pitching to show up more consistently than I do good hitting, just because it's so difficult to hit. To me, it's the most difficult thing to do in all sports is to hit a baseball.
Oh, yeah.
And so I would rather, because like even if Ole Miss's lineup gives Tennessee's pitching issues, Ole Miss's pitching is not so good to the point to where you would think Tennessee's offense would be able to make up for it. Whereas if Vanderbilt's pitching is able to keep Tennessee's lineup in line, that makes it a much closer game, in my opinion. I would rather take my luck against the weak pitching staff than a strong pitching staff, or a weak pitching staff than a strong lineup. So if I could pick, I would pick Tennessee to face Ole Miss, just because Chris McElwain and Carter Holton, I would imagine those two are one of the two that Tennessee would pitch. That's the other thing, or that Vanderbilt would pitch. Ole Miss and Vandy are going to play. It's a single elimination, so they're going to throw their best arm because it's single elimination. That means Ole Miss is likely going to throw Dylan DeLucia, and they don't really have anybody other than that. Their other two options are Hunter Elliott, who does have a 3.43 ERA, but he's a true freshman pitching in Hoover for the first time. The other option is Derek Diamond, who has a 7.81 ERA. So if Ole Miss were to win, it'd be one of those two guys. The true freshman pitching in Hoover for the first time against the best team in the country, or the guy with the near 8 ERA. And I get the jokes, the high ERA guys, they do good against Tennessee. I know those jokes are out there. Looking at you, Sam Smith. So I feel much better about Tennessee hitting off of one of those two guys in a game 2 for Ole Miss than Vandy throwing out Carter Holton or Chris McElvain, because those two guys have helped Vanderbilt be 5th in the league in strikeouts. Carter Holton is 5th individually in strikeouts, and Chris McElwain is 6th in strikeouts in the SEC. And you would get one of those two, whether Vandy starts Holton or McElwain against Ole Miss. If Vandy wins, then you would get the other guy, obviously. And Vandy's lineup, I mean, I just think, like we saw in Nashville, I think Tennessee's pitching staff would just absolutely dominate them if they played. It's Enrique Bradfield Jr. or bust. Spencer Jones, very, very talented, was on the All-SEC team. He had a sneaky good season, but it comes down to Enrique Bradfield Jr. for Vandy. When he scores a run, Vandy's offense scores 7.5 runs per game when he scores a run. When he does not score, they score 2.3 runs per game. 5-run difference between the two. And he is dangerous on base, 42 for 42 in stolen bases this year. So I like the matchup for Tennessee either way, but I would rather see Tennessee try to hit off of Ole Miss's lack of pitching than Vanderbilt's strong pitching, which is 3rd in the conference in ERA. That's just kind of the way I look at it.
I think it's a testament just to, again, and this is not breaking any news, shocking, how much we think Tennessee is in terms of stacked and loadedness, because I view it one way to where I'm like, I'll take Tennessee's lineups against any pitching. And I understand, some nights you're going to run into a buzzsaw. I get that. It is what it is. And, when Tennessee's lost the few games they have so far this year, typically it's because the bats went cold, but also think about every other game they won almost, right? And so I'm looking at it that way, and you're looking at it the other way. It just goes to show you that we have that much confidence in Tennessee, all top to bottom, all the way around. And that's a big reason why, obviously, they've been so good. And I'm sorry, you were talking there for a while, and you said DeLucia, and I'm just sitting here like, please let DeLucia pitch against Tennessee, because, of course, we all remember the comments he made. And he said those comments, and he was done, right? I mean, he didn't pitch the rest of the weekend. Gosh, I will never forget how stupid that was that night he said those. And obviously, Tennessee made Ole Miss pay the next day.
Yeah, and what's funny is he went on to have a really solid season after that.
Yeah.
So that is funny. I would just be very surprised if he pitched against Tennessee, because if you're Ole Miss, single elimination, they're trying to fight to host, I believe, a regional. Why would you not throw him in a single elimination game when he's your best arm? So I'd be very surprised if Tennessee faced him if Ole Miss won. Quite frankly, I think Tennessee beats either of those two teams for the weekend as a whole, or the week as a whole. Well, I guess it will end up being a weekend, but for the SEC tournament as a whole, the teams that scare me are LSU and A&M. Arkansas, they're struggling of late. Their pitching is really dicey at the moment. A&M has really found something, and LSU can really swing it. I would be surprised if Tennessee, A&M, or LSU don't win the SEC tournament. I'd be very surprised if it weren't one of those three teams.
Yeah, I would too. And it's not going to be anybody out of the the single elimination bracket for sure. It's just you've got everything stacked against you, right? And I don't know. I mean, I'll say it, Ben. Like, to me, I don't care. Like, sure, if you win this whole thing this weekend, it's going to be a crapshoot. Weather's going to be awful, jumbling in and out of the lineup in terms of trying to get all your arms in there. It is what it is. I don't care if you win this tournament. Of course, Tony Vitello wants to win it. The players want to win it, and that's great. And I hope they go out there and they play well. What I'm more concerned on is getting everybody work, getting Dickey in there, getting a couple of pinch hit ABs, getting the timing down, playing clean baseball, getting out injury free. I mean, again, it's not nothing. It means something. You want to have a good showing. You want to win the tournament. I'm not discrediting that whatsoever. You saw the basketball team when it won in Tampa. You saw how much it meant to Rick Barnes. You saw how much it meant to that team. I mean, it means something. I understand. But still, at the end of the day, Ben, this doesn't matter, man. Next weekend matters. And so I just want to see them play clean, get everybody working, get out injury free. Let's see if Beck can start finding some holes a little bit, continue swinging it and raking it the way he is, but finding some green grass, stuff like that, more so than anything that where I'm saying, oh, well, if Tennessee doesn't win this tournament, it's going to be a disappointment. Because, again, it's not because SEC baseball, college baseball, it's a sport, and it's this conference. I mean, I understand the conference is what it is this year, but there's still a lot of good baseball teams here.
I'm with you. Look, I want Tennessee to win the tournament.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about that. Like it would be awesome to see them win the SEC tournament. That would be huge. But I'm also not going to be upset if they don't win it. Like I would be upset if they don't make it out of the regional or if they don't make it out of the super regional like that. That's when I'm really going to be upset because the season's over, man. And I maintain even this week, winning the regular season title is more impressive than winning the SEC tournament because all it takes for a team to win it is getting hot this weekend, and that could happen to anybody. So I certainly understand what you're saying.
Same with
there.
basketball too.
Yep, 1,000%. Look, I love that Tennessee won the SEC basketball tournament. Who won the regular season title?
Auburn.
Yes, more impressive. Did they split it with Arkansas?
I think Auburn got it outright, didn't they? No, Arkansas beat Auburn. I'll have to go back and look, but I'm pretty sure Auburn was the number 1 seed in Tampa, so I would assume that they won it.
Right. But it's more impressive.
Been a lot of baseball since then. Been a lot of baseball.
Yes, absolutely. But I maintain even if Tennessee wins the regular season or the tournament title this week, I'll still think that winning the regular season title because you had to do it for 2.5 months is more impressive than winning the tournament title because all it takes is getting hot at the right time. You mentioned what you wanted to see on the way out the door. I'll mention what I want to see, and I thought Tony Vitello summed it up perfectly for me when he was asked about it. 3 words: play good baseball. That's all I want to see. That's all I want to see. If you lose, let it be because baseball got you, not because of self-inflicted wounds. I don't want to see base running mistakes, which seems like they've cleaned up the last couple of games at least. I would like a bigger sample size before I begin to believe in it, but no base running mistakes, play clean defense, even the pitching and the hitting. Like me saying I want to see good baseball doesn't mean that Chase Dolander needs to go out there and throw a no-hitter. What I mean by that in terms of pitching is I don't want to see walks, which they have been good about all year long. I don't want to see walks. I don't want to see the offense swinging at stupid pitches that are balls. I don't want to see them chasing. I just want to see good baseball in every aspect of the game, and that's what will make me feel good about them going into the regionals next weekend. And I thought you brought up a good point as well. The weather and who knows how crappy the weather makes this weekend become. I said it after the Kentucky series. In hindsight, I thought that was more of a product of the circumstances with the weather than Tennessee and its long-term success. I'll be curious to see if we have any of those type of thoughts in hindsight after this weekend as well. But Tony Vitello summed it up perfectly for me on Tuesday when he was asked what he wanted to see or what the goal was. And he just said, play good baseball. And that's exactly how I feel. Play good, fundamental baseball. And if you lose, let it be because it's like Chase Burns the other day. Everybody was mad when Chase Burns didn't get pulled soon enough. Well, the kid made a great pitch low and off the plate on the 2-run double that gave Mississippi State the lead. Like the hitter just made a better swing than Chase Burns made a better pitch. So if you get beat as a pitcher, let it be because of that. You made a great pitch. The guy put a better swing on it. Offensively,
and again, I'll say this again, he was absolutely shoving through 6 innings. So why on earth would you take him out? His pitch count was fine. Anyway, go ahead.
Yes, but there's always going to be the armchair coaching. There's always going to be. So if you're a pitcher, get beat that way. If you lose on the offensive end, let it be because you were hitting the ball all over the park just right at people and you just kind of ran into some bad luck. Don't lose because you played uncharacteristically and were just sloppy. I just don't want to see sloppy baseball. So Eric, it should be a fascinating week, fascinating 24 to 48 hours. Interested to see how the weather plays out and when Tennessee eventually plays. And when they do eventually play, do they change the format of the tournament to make sure it all squeezes in? When will games be played? It'll be a fascinating week in Hoover. And you and I will be back with the good people at some point the day of Tennessee's first game in Hoover.
Yes, sign me up for good baseball, but at this point, Ben, I just want to see baseball. And right now, at the time of this recording, we are not seeing baseball. So anyway, it's should be an eventful week. Any way you want to spend it, looking forward to it, man, and looking forward to your coverage out there on the scene. And of course, linking up just about every day this week, hopefully talking Tennessee baseball.
Absolutely. Stay locked into Volquest.com. You can follow me on Twitter at BenMcKee14 for continuous updates. You can follow Eric Cain as well on Twitter at
_Caner.
There you go. And the great words of the great Brent Hubbs, enjoy your Tuesday, everybody.